to call this council and committee meeting to order. Before we proceed, I want to acknowledge that the land upon which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Adirondack, and the Anishinaabe people. We are the beneficiaries of ancient agreements such as the dish with one spoon between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, who agreed to share the abundance of the land through peace, friendship, and mutual respect. The two-row wampum by which the Haudenosaunee welcomed the settlers and agreed to share the land in mutual respect, and the Treaty of Niagara, considered a fundamental document by First Nations in all future relations and treaties with the British. We recognize that we have a responsibility to be stewards of the land in cooperation and collaboration with the Indigenous peoples, not only for one generation, but for all generations to come. We understand that we have an obligation to learn the lessons of our history, educate ourselves about the experiences of the Indigenous people, and seek opportunities to heal the wounds that will result in reconciliation with our Indigenous sisters and brothers. Many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people live and work in Fort Erie. We stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. We have the good fortune to live in a land of such abundance, diversity, and beauty. Let us be vigilant in protecting Turtle Island. Madam, or Mr. Clerk, the roll call. You know, in all the years that I've been the mayor, there's never been a Mr. Clerk. There was an interim Mr. Clerk for a very short period of time, so you're breaking new ground.
Again, no offense taken, Your Worship. All members of council are present.
Thank you. There is no addendum this evening. I just have two announcements. One has to do with an event that I attended on Saturday evening. It was the 30th anniversary of iCanter out on House Road in Stevensville. That organization was founded in 1993 by Dominic and Diane Ponessa. It's a nonprofit charitable organization, as I mentioned, located on House Road. It was envisioned that the entire farm, which is made up of 87 acres on either side of Beaver Creek, would provide an atmosphere where individuals with barriers could flourish. The wonders of the woods, the creek, the marsh, and the gardens would all become part of a very hands-on experience for all who visit. The benefits of using nature, horses, and horse-related activities to accomplish therapeutic goals was immediately embraced by our community. Today, iCanter continues to offer agricultural-based therapeutic and wellness programming in the Niagara region. They specialize in therapy and rehabilitation, education and training, recreation, and leisure. The farm provides the perfect setting for alternative education and unique individualized and group programming. iCanter continues to strive to provide and develop programs for those with a variety of barriers, disabilities, and limitations while supporting friends and families of these individuals. iCanter is dedicated to providing a healthy environment for personal growth and development. The farm now consists of a number of buildings, including an arena, horse barn, 2 cottages for nature experiences, a nature center, and a classroom. Work to improve the property and enhance its natural heritage continues, and we wish iCanter many more years of success in our community. And the second announcement relates to my knowledge that today is the 39th birthday of Councillor George McDermott. And you know, I know it's been a hard 39 years, but congratulations, Councillor McDermott, and I wish you, on behalf of council, many, many more.
Youngest one on council now, right?
He's yeah, but he's had a hard life, as you can tell. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? If there are none, there's a couple of upcoming public meetings. One relates to an open house of a proposed draft plan of subdivision, official plan, and zoning bylaw amendment for property located at 1211, 1225, and 1237 Pettit Road. That open house will take place on Thursday, October 19th, 2023 at 6 p.m. here in the Town Hall atrium. And we also have the budget meeting schedule, with the first budget meeting scheduled for Wednesday, November the 15th, 2023. That will be the capital budget and forecast. All budget meetings thereafter will begin at 6 p.m. And we have the budget bylaws tentatively scheduled for November 27th, 2023 for the preliminary capital budget. That then takes us to this evening's public meeting. This is a meeting under the Planning Act, and council will receive information from a staff member, Aaron Hare, who will provide us with background regarding the application. He will then be subject to any questions that councillors may have. After he has completed his presentation and is asked questions, then the applicant or the applicant's proponent may address council and again be subject to any questions that councillors may have. After that, I will ask if there's anyone in the audience who wishes, or digitally zooming into the meeting, who wishes to speak on behalf of the applicant in support of the application. And thereafter, I'll ask if there's anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the application. Anyone who does appear before council is subject to being questioned by members of council if councillors have any questions. After we've completed that, I will ask Mr. Patton if there's anyone else in the digital waiting room. I will then ask the clerk if we've received any late correspondence that's not referred to in the report that is before council. Once all of that is done, I will declare the meeting closed unless there's a reason for it to be adjourned. And then if we proceed, we will deal with report PDS 69 for 2023, which is the recommendation report from staff regarding the matter. So having said that, Mr. Hare, you would like to proceed? Good evening.
Good evening, Council. Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide an information regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 986 Ridge Road North. And I just forgot to introduce myself. I'm Aaron Hare. I'm the Senior Community Planner with the town. The purpose of this application is to permit the creation of 3 new lots for residential. Each newly created lot is proposed to support 1 single detached dwelling. The zoning is proposed to change the rural residential and EC overlay to a site-specific rural residential zone, and to convert the remainder of the EC overlay to environmental protection. The site-specific rural residential zoning will contain special provisions to implement the development plan. Notification of the October 16th, 2023 public meeting was provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act by placing a public notice sign on the subject lands. In addition, all property owners within 120 meters were notified and mailed of the application. Okay. This slide shows the timeline of the development application. The application was submitted prior to the refund provisions of the Planning Act coming into effect. Therefore, regardless of the timelines, no free refunds will be granted. The reason why we are so far in the process is the applicant was trying to work through some of the comments and conditions that were raised as part of the development, as well as the process started really to gain momentum once the applicant's agent rejoined the project. The subject property is located outside of the urban boundary, north of the Ridgeway secondary plan, and south of Highway 3. It's just outlined in yellow on the screen. Okay, the subject lands have a lot area of 5.6 hectares and a frontage of 22.6 meters. The nearest public open space is Shagbark Natural Area, located approximately 550 meters to the south of the subject lands along Nye Road. The following summarize the land uses surrounding the subject lands. To the north is single detached dwellings, natural heritage, and a church. To the east are more single detached dwellings. To the south, more single detached dwellings, natural heritage, as well as an equestrian farm. And to the west is additional single detached dwellings. The subject lands are located outside of the urban area and the rural residential designation in accordance with Schedule A of the official plan. The rural residential area is where rural residential development has taken place or approved for development has been given. The permitted uses are single detached dwellings on large lots suitable for private servicing. The official plan states that lands designated rural residential as of June 16, 2006 can develop by plan as subdivision or condominium. Schedule C of the official plan illustrates that the subject lands are located within a significant natural area and woodlands over 2 hectares. The official plan requires development or site alteration within or adjacent to significant natural areas to demonstrate through an environmental impact study that the proposed development would not result in degradation or threat to the health or integrity of the natural feature or its function. The subject lands are zoned site-specific rural residential 651 with an environmental conservation overlay zone in accordance with the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw as amended. Single detached dwellings are currently permitted under the zoning, and the zoning bylaw amendment proposes to rezone the subject lands to permit the reduced minimum frontage and to remove the EC overlay and replace it with an environmental protection zone to provide for long-term protection of the woodland. We'll get to that in a little bit more detail in a few upcoming slides. Again, this is just more of a zoomed-in aerial of the subject property. This will come into effect when we're talking about the rezoning on the next slides. So this is the proposed site plan, which is really just for illustration purposes tonight. And so this shows the reduced minimum frontage and the changing of the EC overlay. So the area in green and orange on the proposed slides are the areas that are subject to be rezoned to environmental protection. The exact outline of the area that is going to be redone EP is currently in the process of being staked, and then the town's environmental staff, in conjunction with the regional's environmental staff, will go out there and will agree to where the exact location of the environmental protection zone would be. The areas shown in orange on the map are the areas that are being requested to be dealt with under a restoration plan. This light colored orange is the 5 meter buffer from the natural heritage feature. And this area down here in orange is identified as being part of the feature under the EIS. So that's why it's being proposed to be environmental protection. This is just a site looking into the proposed site. This is what the interior of the site looks like. And again, on September 28th, we did have a public open house here at Town Hall. And the comments that we received are summarized and responded to in the staff report. But the primary comments that we heard were with regards to site access, tree removal, hunting on the property, lighting from vehicles entering and exiting the site, speeding along Ridge Road, loss of privacy, and the use of the lands. And when I say the use of the lands, there's, I guess, a undeveloped trail back there, and people have been using it in the past, so that's what we refer to as the use of the land. That does conclude our presentation with regards to the rezoning application, and we're here to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harrod. Any members of council have any questions? Well, you've done an excellent job.
Yes.
Obviously, no questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so next I'm going to ask the applicant or the applicant's agent, and Mr. Perezaire, is your agent zooming into this meeting?
Agent will talk first and then I'll follow up.
Yep, fair enough. So. Okay. That's great, bring him in.
Am I online?
We can hear you, Mr. Darbison.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. All right, Your Worship and members of council, thank you very much for hosting the public meeting this evening. My name is Eldon Darbison. I'm a registered professional planner and agent for the owner, Mr. Parazater. We both intend to say a few words this evening, and just a thank you to staff for working with us along the way. I have, oh, okay, great, you have the presentation up. I could also share my screen, whatever's easier for you guys. This would be suitable. I can just suggest next slide when the time comes.
That's fine.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, next slide, please. The proposal is to permit up to 3 single detached dwelling units on the property. The existing dwelling and shed are intended to remain. A new private driveway and cul-de-sac is proposed to provide access to the 3 dwelling units. The zoning amendment will facilitate the 3 units, the private driveway, and add protection to the woodlot, as Mr. Hare had alluded to. The proposed condominium allows for each lot to be owned individually while ensuring condominium fees are collected and administered for the long-term maintenance of the driveway and cul-de-sac. Next slide, please. The provincial policies encourage development and the protection of the environment. The regional policies have the same mandate but limit development to 3 units. The town's policies protect the environment and encourage development subject to local standards. This application is supported by studies including an archaeological report, environmental impact study, and a hydrogeological study. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes what Mr. Hare had outlined the zoning bylaw amendment application to contain, and also the purpose of the condominium application for ownership and long-term maintenance. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of protection here. There's a butternut tree, the whitewood aster, and the woodlot. As such, the lands under the EC overlay are being rezoned to environmental protection, which also include the 5-meter buffer around the woodlot. Basically, this means that you're not allowed to build anything within that buffer or within the woodlot, and that's fine. Stormwater is subject to town approval. Private wastewater is up to the region for approval. And both the region and the town are looking at sediment and erosion control. The conditions of the condominium, draft plan of condominium, ensure that development occurs properly in accordance with the town standards. So currently, as Mr. Hare had mentioned, we are discussing some of the towns and regional staff conditions and hoping to work through those. Next slide, please. So of the 33 conditions recommended in the staff report, we would like to speak to only 5 of them. The most significant condition is regarding the restoration plan. The condition for this restoration plan includes dense plantings within the 5-meter buffer with native, natural, self-sustaining vegetation. It is mentioned that this plan is to restore the buffer. But for many years, the buffer area has been and is currently grass. The trees and the whitewood aster continue to be healthy. The lands underneath the drip line are actively filling in naturally, thus protecting the woodland edge. Portions of the woodlot have been enjoyed by the owner and his family, such as strolls through the trails with his granddaughter. It is the owner's intent to allow the vegetation to grow naturally into the buffer area. Additional protection of an environmental protection zone ensures both the woodlot and the buffer are zoned to preclude development. So the requirement of a restoration plan is like additional protection on top of protection. And the big question is at what cost? Next slide, please. The buffer is intended to keep suitable separation between development and the existing feature. Enhancing the buffer with more plantings may change the environment of the whitewood aster and cause it to die. It's a very sensitive species. The owner will discuss this further when he speaks. The buffer is approximately 275 meters long and 5 meters wide. Estimating that the cost to plant the buffer are $400 to $500 a meter, this would cost between $110,000 and $137,000. Even if the cost could be lowered a bit, they would make the purchase of Lot 1 very costly. The owner's intent was to facilitate development for people at a reasonable cost, which is what current government policy is striving for. The requirement of a restoration plan does not meet the intention of providing housing at a reasonable cost. Requiring this additional level of protection to lands already being protected is not reasonable. This is the reason why we are asking council in this case to remove the conditions associated with the restoration plan. Next slide, please. Requested relief. As mentioned previously, we have a few more conditions that we ask council for relief from. Condition 8 is in respect to reports to guide construction of a paved private driveway and cul-de-sac. Pavement is not proposed at this time. It was intended to leave that decision to the condominium corporation. It is possible to service the condominium with municipal water. Should the condo corporation wish to pursue this in the future, a portion of the driveway and cul-de-sac would need to be removed and reconstructed. It is our request that pavement not be required. We suggest that the condition be reworded to allow the owner to work with the Director of Infrastructure Services on an acceptable method of the driveway and cul-de-sac construction, including dust control. Condition 22 is regarding erosion and sediment control fencing. I had an opportunity to discuss this with the town, and it's my understanding that the region's requirement is that all the footprints and septic areas be included within the erosion and sediment control fencing. We agree that some ESC fencing is necessary, but only where water drains downhill. At the end of my presentation, the owner would like to speak to this condition in greater detail. Conditions 23 and 24 on this slide that is up is in respect to the restoration plan. As discussed previously, the plan is costly in adding protection to the woodlands on top of the 5-meter buffer, along with the rezoning of the woodlot and the buffer to environmental protection is not necessary in this case, and we would ask council to remove these conditions. Next slide, please. Finally, the 5th condition we are asking relief from is a portion of condition 28. It's the region's policy to not require a hydrogeological study to support septic systems on lots greater than 1 hectare. Lot 1 in this case is over 3 hectares. We're not opposed to condition 28 in its entirety, but we request council remove lot 1 from the condition, considering that the lot 1 is over 3 hectares. Next slide, please. So in summary, this application complies with and is supported by planning policy, supported by the region, the town, and commenting agencies. There are only a few conditions we are requesting relief from in whole or in part. The major concern is the requirement for the restoration plan. Extra protection of the woodlot is not balanced with the intent to encourage reasonable housing at a reasonable cost. Thank you for your time. The owner would like to address council with a few items as well, and we are happy to address any of council's questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Darbison. I think what we'll do is we'll have some questions of you first, and then we'll go to Mr. Parazater. Any members of council have any questions of Mr. Darbison? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Darbison. In regards to the restoration plan, is that not the region's request?
Yes. Yeah, there's a restoration plan and there was comments from the town as well, but it's a regional condition.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship. And one question that I have, and that's with respect to page 8 of the report. It mentions some comments from the town's Ecological Environmental Advisory Committee where they mentioned the water quality impact risk assessment did not accurately assess groundwater, and I believe that there was a discrepancy between 3.6 and what should have been 7.4 in the report. Is that something that would be modified by those who did the report, or do you have any comments with respect to that?
Yes, I understand the comment. The region has a review policy in respect to that. Any of their questions and clarifications will be provided by the consulting engineer, and it'll be dealt with at the regional level.
Okay, so just an answer to that question, so that report would be updated?
Yes, and it'll be updated to meet the region's expectations.
Perfect, thank you. And if I can continue, Your
You may.
Worship. I'm not sure if we're able to put up the map showing the 3 properties on the subject lands. I did have an opportunity to walk the property with EAC when they went out to look at the property. When I originally heard the comment that it really was an extension of Shagbark Trail, part of me, my eyes rolled back and didn't quite agree. But after visiting part of the property, I do see why that comment was made. Even though there's no connection physically to Shagbark, you can see that it is a bit of a corridor that runs towards Nye Road. And my question is, and I have spoke with the developer, but has there been any discussion in terms of the woodlot portion of Lot 1 being dedicated to the town of Fort Erie as environmental protection lands? Even though there is no right of access, I think there would be some interest, at least from my perspective, in saving some of that tree canopy and also adding it to the town's inventory of natural heritage areas. Any comments on that?
Yes, so we were made aware of that comment through the Environmental Advisory Committee recommendation. It's concerning. That would represent like a 66% parkland dedication. It is on private property as well. It would also reduce the lot to something quite smaller, which would change the requirements for the septic bed. It becomes quite complicated, quite frankly. The environmental protection zone does ensure that it is protected for the long term. Again, it would be, in my opinion, another method of added protection that is unnecessary in this case.
Councillor Lewis?
Thank you. And if I can continue, my understanding is for lot number 1, and I don't know if there's an opportunity to bring that map up on the screen, but I am of the understanding that there is enough land within the cleared area of house number 1 that would satisfy the need for septic, and that wooded lot is not required for that to be met. Is that accurate, or am I under a misunderstanding?
Yeah, I don't know what the exact area is for the cleared area. We still have to stake it, as Aaron mentioned, for the buffer and the EP zone. So I can't answer that question with confidence, quite honestly. But what it would do is, if the lands are removed, then it would require another report from the consulting engineer to address the reduced land area. And I don't know what that would mean. But I mean, I would highly discourage that action.
Councillor Lewis?
Yeah, and if I may continue, and I'll save the same question for the applicant when he comes up to make a deputation to council. But it would be fair to say that the environmental protection zone, the woodlot, is not something that's being used for the purpose of a septic tank. Would that not be correct?
That is correct.
And if that's the case, then having the woodlot as part of Lot 1 would not be a necessary requirement for Lot 1 to have a home built on it?
I'm sorry, could you state that again?
And maybe it's poor wording on my part, long day, but if the woodlot is not required, or the environmental protection zone, for a septic tank on Lot 1, then the area that is cleared would theoretically be enough land to house the building plus the septic tank. And I noticed they're located on the map. So my question
Theoretically,
is,
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say theoretically, yes, but it would have to be supported by an engineering report to deal with that specific lot size and gentrification, as well as of just like plume areas and things like that. So again, it comes down to the region's policies and practices. I also would like to mention that the woodlot feature, it is permitted to be used for passive recreation, and you know, it's a nice feature for the future owner of Lot 1 to be a good steward. So it would be very unfortunate if that that opportunity were removed from the owner of future owner of Lot 1.
Councillor Lewis.
One last question in that regard. That would be assuming that because it is deemed over to the town, that that person would not be able to use the area.
Or maintain it. Oh, yes, and or maintain it.
Yeah, and the reason I bring that up is the question about maintenance. I know that was a concern of EAC in terms of a house is built, then later a shed is built, then a garden is built, then next the compost pile becomes further back on the property. Next thing you know, there's a tree house in the backyard and a Quonset hut with a four-wheeler. It's the, I guess, lack of better words, the creep factor into the environmental protection zone that I think has most of EAC's backup. I know in the report it mentions.
Okay, you're now getting into comments as opposed to questions.
Oh, I'm getting to a question.
Good, good.
The reason that I bring this up is the EAC report recommends giving up Lot 1 in exchange for those natural or environmental protection lands. What I'm talking about is allowing Lot number 1 to still be in place, but the town acquiring the environmental protection zone to the east. And I guess in order to make that a question, I would have to ask, do you have any comments with respect to that?
Yes, unless the owner agrees, I could not support that.
And that's totally fair.
And discourage. Yeah.
Thank you for your comments and presentation. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Anyone
Thank
else
you.
for Mr. Darvison? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Darvison. So we'll hear now from Mr. Parazater, who's here. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors, staff. Okay, I'll go over some of the same items, but before I do, Shagbark Park has been brought up twice now. I'd like to make a couple comments on that. Number one, I was surprised at what they wanted, the property. I don't know if they realize in the past I gave 26 acres for the park. So I think it was a little unfair to ask for more, but and it doesn't make sense to have a park that distance away. And the comment about that woodlot extending towards the Shagbark Trail, only to the extent of being behind the houses on Nye, there's no way that would ever be extended. And yeah, it is a nice piece of property. Okay. Yeah, before I go into my notes, your comment on that Lot 1, yes, there's sufficient for septics on it, otherwise I wouldn't allow it. And the other question about you had about there was an error on the consultant's calculations. That was actually, I have an email to that effect from Phil Lambert of the region, and he did the corrections himself. So that problem was resolved. But, that's available if you contact him. So trying to answer your questions there. There are things. So yeah, it would definitely, if for some reason the town the property was there for the town, but from an insurance standpoint, they would be maybe quite reluctant to take that on. And in the middle there, ever since we owned the property 35 years, neighbors have used it, talking about four-wheelers. Yeah, they used to come through there all the time, snowmobilers. I had no problem with them. The only problem was I started speeding too much and had to slow them down. In the summer times, the young teenagers had their little parties and do's in there and so forth. My son included in there, but at the time I had to put a stop on it for a couple of years, and then nobody should have showed up, was started drinking, so that was a problem. Encroachment, yeah, if you look around the town, lots of encroachments, but if EP doesn't stop that, or there's no other method, why even have it? Okay, we've tried to maintain it. We've maintained approximately 90% of the woodlands when we first bought it in 1989. All right, so yeah, the kids, grandchildren, and friends, family, neighbors have all used it, no problems. There was always a, concern of possible insurance, but that never materialized. I would think a lot depends on the owner to maintain it. We never maintain it to the sense of changing it. The trails were there. There was a roadway through there from the previous owner. He used the open space there. So as far as we're concerned, the kids had a little campfire, like you mentioned, a tree house, but that's all gone. It's only temporary. Way back, I said, well, I'll fool the town and I'll build a tree house and live in there. And I walked into the new offices here, and he showed me the screen. Everything's down there. You couldn't get away with anything. So if you check even the Geopedia, you can check where all this stuff is going on. Are you going to police that? Because I see a lot of examples of encroachment into EC, EP areas. But anyway, let's get on with this here. Okay. Now, I'm going to, going over to just one more thing on the background. This property was mandated at the time, prior to our purchase, to be developed. And that's been in existence. And for the first 25 years, I wasn't even allowed to build a house. Okay, had to maintain the property. The town took a 1-foot reserve on the frontage, and that was it, and still exists. It only helps with the assessment people anyway, no frontage. Anyway, number one, I want to start with condition 8, and Eldon has gone over it, but to me, the report was based on the laneway to be a public road, which is an error. And I thought, well, if they thought it was a public road, they required more scrutiny of the site. And this, I believe, triggered a request for a geotechnical report. But I'm probably wrong on that, but that's what I figured. It's not a normal request for residential housing or for a very low volume traveled laneway. A geotechnical report covers general site conditions, geology, drainage, and ground cover. All this has been covered under a hydrological study and a grading and drainage plan. As per report, the site is irregular with gentle slope of 2 to 5%, with excellent drainage, self-draining. Ground cover consists of a maximum of 18 inches of 18 inches of topsoil over limestone rock subsurface. Soil classification is Farmington #1 loam with no clay present. No water encountered at a depth of 5 feet into the rock. At all times, no matter what time of the year. So I think all that answers what a technical report would be. I don't think it's necessary to duplicate that. I think engineering and infrastructure are well aware of what's there. Quite a few houses built. I built 3 of them around there. Some with 5 feet into rock removal, and some pumps and no pumps. And one house has a walkout in the basement, and there's never any water. So anyway, if you, I would appreciate removal of this only on the basis that they're satisfied with all these knowledge of what's there, and it's all in the hydrological report, and otherwise it's a straight duplication of what's already been submitted. Okay, number 2. Okay, designed erosion sediment plan, and you'll see that on some sites, and that's all for any water flow sediment downgradient from the site. There's no sense putting it all around. Water doesn't flow uphill. And then they talked about other fencing. I assumed it was construction fencing because that's what they asked for for the northern boundary. But apparently at the last minute here, talking with my planner, no, it's sediment and erosion sediment control fencing they want all around the site. That's about 2,000 feet of it, which really doesn't do anything except only certain areas, which we have a plan for, and as an exercise, did a plan for what they're calling for. Very impractical, doesn't do any good, and it gets in the way. If you look at other construction sites, an example, Waverly Beach, everything's stripped down there. There is no fencing. There's a little bit along where the tree line is, and they've gone right up to it. And look at any housing construction. You don't find fencing around the whole perimeter or the footprint as they're asking here. I don't see why expending money on something that's non-functional. Anyway, to me, where the fencing should be is the construction fencing to be installed wherever needed to protect the trees in case there's construction gets too close. And not that the building would be too close, but just the construction activities. So, and grading drainage plans have been submitted, and combined with self-draining will ensure no muddy water leaves the site. So again, it's spending money on something that is non-functional, not needed. Okay, that's my opinion on that. Okay, number 28 I jumped to, about the nitrification requirement. Yes, originally when I talked to the region, they said, oh, no, that's a large lot, it would not be required a geological study. But then they changed their mind and put all 3 lots into the study. So, but what could I do? I had to do the study based on that. But their own official plan says anything over 1 hectare is not needed on a hydrological study. because the concept of larger 1 hectare lots is that it provides the necessary area attenuation, which is called also plume area, for the natural deficification within the soil to take place. So that's the reason why that would be. Again, it's a requirement doesn't even follow their own rules, and now they're asking for it. Okay, the last one is, again, the most important one, the restoration plan. And just to add some similar comments, it's costly without achieving any benefit for protection. The zoning change to EP provides all the protection. When our discussions with the region about the EIS, we agreed to a 5-meter buffer, which to me was a setback, which was applicable to all construction. It also defines the extent of developable area and which maintains a reasonable distance between the woodlands and any development. And has always been kept an open grassed area, well, grassed and weed area, and will be continued to be maintained as such. So to now do dense plantings of shrubs and trees into that area, the only thing it accomplished is expanding the wooded area and expansion and intensification is not what the whitewood aster needs. It needs the right amount or balance of sunlight, and by the addition of trails and openings is a benefit. To intensify any growth is the exact opposite to what it needs. And this I have right from the Ministry of Environment. I have a copy of what they say. And so, again, it's a waste of money because it doesn't do anything, okay? Best to leave the feature on its own without undue alterations. Considering that these protected species exist, demonstrates that leaving it the way it is the best way. Why start altering what is sufficient? Okay, let's see. So requesting all 4 of those be deleted. Okay. Okay. I tried on a number of occasions to develop the property, and never received support for any of them. Well, one of them was for geared to seniors, opposed for unsupported reasons. The second option, which was that I did, was for 4 residents, which are allowed under the rural residential zoning. No support. The only possible proposals for the current 3 lots. So I backed off on what could be done, just to follow the region's official plan for a maximum of 3 lots, and how they ever arrived at that, I'll never know. Now, with these extensive costs bringing this application to this stage and facing unnecessary additional unwarranted costs could seriously undermine the proposed project. So if you appreciate any favorable consideration on these items, otherwise it might not be a go. So I'll leave it up to any questions for now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parazator. Any members of council have any questions? Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Parazator, for the presentation. I'm going to ask the same question I asked to your consultant, and that was, if the 3 lots go ahead, lots 1, 2, and 3, would there be any interest on your end to work with the town of Fort Erie to dedicate a percentage or a part of the environmental protection zone woodlot to the town of Fort Erie?
Well, like I said, I mentioned this some time ago, and they said no. All right, it'd be isolated, and they said no. Yeah, theoretically, not a bad idea. All right, possibly, but I have to consider that it would, like my planner says, devaluates the lot. But in some cases, a new owner might not want to be responsible for it all. But who's going to police it? It could cause, neighbors are worried about what this is doing now to them. With that as really a free open spot, could create a big nuisance problem, okay? So if somebody says, well, that's public property, how do I get to it? Well, I'll trespass, whatever, to get to it. And then if we can't control people going into EP and EC now, what control would we have there? Okay, and yes and no is basically my answer, depending on what you come up with. Yeah.
Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, and if I can continue with that, and I want to give a little bit of context as to why I'm asking. I know myself and Councillor Christensen are quite concerned about the loss of canopy growth in the Ridgeway and Crystal Beach area. We have natural corridors which are identified as natural corridors, however, houses have still gone up on them. And I see this, and I will make this a question, Your Worship, I see this as a long-term approach to potentially being able to capture and preserve canopy growth. I agree with you completely on the policing bit and how we enforce it, but I think that is an issue that has to be addressed regardless of whether it's town-owned environmental protection land or environmental protection land that is owned by private residents or condo corporations. So I think that's an absolutely valid point, but my job up here is to try and find a way for you to be able to move forward with an application and build houses that are definitely needed in a respectful way, but at the same point, making sure that we have a long-term plan in place for continuing to have canopy growth. So my question is, would you not agree that municipally owned environmental protection would be an added avenue to ensure continued protection of an environmental protection zone?
Well, I have to go right back to what I said, yes and no. People have built on road allowances, so where was the protection?
Yeah.
Okay. I think with the EP, the tree bylaws under consideration, apparently going to be tougher. Region has its own thing. There's no further development allowed by the region, okay? The condominium corporation, even though they're only responsible for the common element roadway, but could put in there too, no encroachments. What encroachments are there's sufficient land for a house, swimming pool, a few other buildings. There's sufficient. I think too is would be up to the town to monitor encroachments on town property, other people's property. Simple thing. For an example, I had do with a assessment thing, and they said they don't come out and look. All they have to do is look it up on this Geopedia site, and they can see where things are going. Simple process. They didn't even have my accessory building on there, and I says, "Don't you guys do anything?" And then look, I says, "It's there," and they started assessing me on it. So really, I think the onus would be on the town to, if they say no encroachments there, and then it's a simple process, in my opinion today, to do that.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for that answer. And a yes, no maybe is much better than a hard no, so I appreciate that. My last question is, in the report it mentions that the existing properties would be serviced by private septic systems and existing water service or cistern. And then I heard from your consultant in the report that it was going to be cistern and not town water. Is that?
Okay, here's the problem. It's always been not me being up on things. The region says no water extensions and no connections. So for 10 years, we sat with that, and they still hold to that. And so if you look at other places, yeah, cisterns go in. But there's water already.
Excuse me, Mr. President. The report suggests that connecting to municipal water is a possibility. I think that's what Councillor Lewis is driving at.
Yeah.
You're giving us the history, I know. So the question is there contemplation of potentially hooking into the water system?
Well,
Municipalities prepared to permit that apparently.
it involves a considerable, yes, I looked into that. First of all, I talked to,
I think it's a yes or a no.
no explanation?
Well,
No, not at this time. Okay.
Councillor Lewis.
Okay, no, that's an answer I appreciate. And I probably was one of the teenagers running around back there at one point too, so I think you referenced that earlier at some point. But thank you for your clarification and presentation.
Councillor Noyes.
Yes, I'm looking at the, the drawings of the lots. Where is the septic system on the retained lot?
On the retainer,
Yeah, where is it?
in front of the property,
Okay,
front of
yeah.
the house.
So none of this, like putting
Pardon?
putting the additional road in, additional access?
I'm sorry.
Putting in the additional access isn't going to,
No, additional access is on the other side of the driveway.
okay, thank you.
Any other members of council? Thank you very much, Mr. Parazader.
Okay.
So at this point, I'm going to ask if there's, once you're finished, if there's anyone who wishes to speak in support of the application other than the applicant or the applicant's agent, please come forward. And Mr. Patton, can you advise whether there's anyone in the digital waiting room that might wish to speak in favor of the application?
Just the representative.
Okay, so there's only one person. Okay. So then at this point, I'm going to ask if there's anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the application or ask questions of members of council with respect to the application. I'll need your full name and address for the record, sir.
Douglas Allen Flake, 959 Ridge Road North, Ridgeway.
Proceed.
I wasn't prepared for this, but I have a concern after listening to the amendments. Is this going to be a private road, access road going in?
That's the.
Is
what
that the,
report says.
is that the report?
Yeah.
With septic system and cisterns?
That's what we've been told by Mr. Perizzetto.
So my concern is my driveway is directly across from the proposed property. There's gonna be trucks coming in and out with water, septic, added traffic. There was mention of no pavement. So the dust, everything's gonna come right straight across the street to my dwelling. The other concern is that there's only, what, 18 inches to rock? So is the town, or whoever, if my walls start to crack due to the added weight of the trucks and cars, who's gonna cover those costs to repairs to my property?
I'm sorry, did you say you live across the street?
Yep, directly.
Yeah, okay.
And in fact, the proposed driveway will be in direct line with my driveway, let alone the traffic coming in and out.
Okay.
Who's gonna police that? Who's going to take care of that as far as stop signs, whatever? Intersection, right in my front yard.
So that's a matter that we can ask staff.
Yep.
When we get to the report.
Okay.
Anything further, Mr.
No,
Flagg? Any members of council have any questions? Thank you very much, sir.
thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to speak on the matter, please come forward. Can we have your name and address for the record, sir?
My name is Lonnie Fairchild. I live at 955 Ridge Road, which is across the street from George.
Yep, go ahead.
First question I had is, I don't know in the timeline, but I don't know if it'd be slide 4. Can you bring up? There's 3 or 4 slides I wanted to look at. So when you guys have these meetings, are these meetings on record if you wanted to go back and look at?
They're
Okay.
on record and there's recording.
Okay, so we had a Zoom meeting a few years ago when George sold the property on this said land with the road that goes to Burley Road.
Okay, so you ask of these meetings, I thought you were talking about a planning,
No, so what I'm getting at is, to me, instead of having everything on Ridge Road, it should be on Burley Road. And he did that by selling that, so he was landlocked, so he could go ahead with this proposal. Anyways, if you could go to, I think it's slide 7. Okay, so you see, he wants to put the road beside the old wooden garage there? Or isn't that property, it's not? Okay,
well, you can see the parcel fabric, so the
Right.
yellow lines indicate the parcel.
so that road would
proposal
go
is to
straight
put
through?
The proposal that we've got is to put the driveway to the south of that garage.
Okay, and as a private road, you don't have to have certain road allowances?
Well, it wouldn't be a road allowance, it's not a given road, it would be a private road, it'd be similar to a driveway into a lane, it'd be similar to, some of these roads that go into, any condominium development in town.
Okay. And then the other thing is the traffic assessment, which from the planning department said that all the traffic, the excess traffic on Ridge Road would be suitable?
Okay. That's what they
Or-
said.
Okay, so right now, Ridge Road is a pretty dangerous road to be on, just with speeding. And again, with you have extra vehicles coming out of there. The bend, today there was actually a school bus, and a school bus adds another element to the traffic with people speeding around that corner and actually slowing down at the lights. That becomes a very dangerous curved corner. And then you add this driveway in there. just the way people drive these days, it isn't getting any safer. And so you're adding another development on Ridge Road here. And then I also heard that at the school, you're gonna be adding 93 properties, which is approximately 200 cars. And I can't see that not being an impact on Ridge Road. That's pretty much all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fairchild. Councillor Lewis?
Your Worship, and thank you for the question. I just want to have you repeat the last question because I don't think I heard it correctly. With the increase of the 3 homes, how many, did you say 200?
No. I said I know it was separate from this.
Yeah.
But a traffic assessment was done that you're gonna be developing 93 homes where the school is.
Okay, gotcha.
And that still will not have an impact on a road, because if you go 93 homes, everybody has 2 cars, that's a minimum of 150 to 200 cars. And you only can go down Ridge Road or Gorman Road. And if that doesn't have an impact, there's something wrong with that.
And thank you. I just wasn't following.
And I just,
That's a development that hasn't
Yeah.
come before council yet.
okay.
Any other members of council have any questions of Mr. Fairchild? Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome, thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to address council with respect to this application? Mr. Patton, is there anyone new in the waiting room? No, Your Worship. Okay. Mr. Clerk, we received a couple of late pieces of correspondence with respect to this matter.
Yes, Your Worship. Staff received written comments from the following individuals: Dr. Mohammed Abraham, 1000 Ridge Road North; John and Judy Reed, 980 Ridge Road North. These comments have been forwarded to council and planning staff to be considered and included in the future staff report.
And these, well, may not be a future staff report, but there may be a further report. In any event, those are part of the record now, and so they will be part of the record for this matter, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So if there are no further representations, then I'm going to declare this public meeting closed, and I'm going to move on the agenda to report PDS 69, 2023. Do I have a mover for that report? Councillor Lewis? Questions or comments? Yep, I'm going to go to you, Councillor Lewis, first. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of questions. I guess I'll start with the questions that came up from some of the delegates tonight. With respect to the traffic assessment, I just wanted to, wondered if staff could provide a little bit more clarity in terms of the impact this subdivision would have on Ridge Road North.
Mr. Hare, if you want to come forward,
Yes.
we'll let you answer these.
Yes, thank you, Council. Through you, your Mayor, to Councillor Lewis. A traffic impact study was not required for this development because of the minimal amount of lots. The average annual daytime traffic that is anticipated for one of these lots is significantly low, and the traffic impact assessment was not required.
Thank you. And just further to that, the other question regarding the concern about septic trucks, water trucks, as well as the 18 inches of, or the bedrock being close and potential damage to neighbor properties. Are there any comments you'd wish to make on that one?
I've never heard of a well being damaged by vehicles, but that could be something that we could look into.
And it might have been as well during construction.
Yeah,
I at least took it was the construction portion.
Yeah, no, we don't have any comments for those. With regard to the traffic exiting the site, council, if they choose so, they could make it a requirement that a traffic stop sign be put at the end of the the private road.
I will yield my more. I just have to find what I wrote.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up to Councillor Lewis's question, one of the conditions of the 33 is that there be a pre-condition survey of surrounding properties
That is correct.
before construction starts?
Yes, that is something that our development engineering staff requested.
Okay, so that's something that the developer will have to undertake and will have to engage the residents who live in the vicinity?
That is correct, yes. They would have to contact them.
Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And through you, it's more of a comment with regard to the report. I appreciate the input and all the information that we've received tonight. And I did have some correspondence back and forth with Mr. Parazater earlier regarding some of the conditions. I'm just wondering, and I'm not going to move this now because I think there may be some more comments and questions coming forward. But I'm wondering if, in light of Mr. Parazater's comments with regard to the property and perhaps a conveyance or, maybe a discussion about that, I'm wondering if it might be worthwhile to postpone this to get some more information, just to settle some of these concerns. Maybe there's an opportunity to work on the conditions, knowing that there's a conveyance of property, just something like that. That's just my comment, Your Worship. I'll yield my time to see if there's other questions, but I'm coming back to me. I think it might be worthwhile to postpone this to get that information. Thank you.
Okay, are there any Bill 23 implications if this matter were?
With regards to Bill 23, Your Mayor, or Your Worship, no, there would not be, because their application was submitted in February. The Planning Act timelines applications I've received on or after July 1st of this year are subject to the refunds. The applicant would still have the right to appeal under the Planning Act if the rezoning is not dealt with within the 90 days. And again, we are at day 90 or 81 today.
All right. Okay. Anything further, Councillor Dubanow? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. In regards to the concerns about the woodlots and the environmental protection area, is there any way that on the site plan or the sale of the property that you can actually require a maintenance of the environmental and protection area in the woodlots? I'm trying to be creative here. I guess it can't be part of a condominium agreement because not all the other two properties don't benefit from it.
Through your mayor to Councillor Noyes, if you were to put it as a requirement to condominium agreement, it would impact all of the lots.
It would have to be designated as a common area.
I'm thinking we would have to look into it a little bit further, but a conservation easement may be a tool that we could use. Again, that would be something that we would have to look into further.
Okay. Thank you for that. My thoughts are going towards not necessarily having it turned over to the town because there's no access, but if there's any way we can make it part of a condominium agreement or whatever, that property is maintained. In regards to the questions about paving or not paving in the driveway, I know that's a condition that we're saying that it should be paved. And I am concerned about the dust that will be created, particularly on the property that's right adjacent to it, the other house. If there is no, the water, like the rationale for not doing it is that we would have to dig it up if we put water in it. But would that be something that we would say, no, it has to be paved, and kind of like a no wiggle room on that one?
My understanding is in the Southern Development Manuals, there is a provision in there that would allow the Director of Infrastructure Services to accept a alternative standard through proper justification.
Okay, thank you. The other thing, one of the requests that that wasn't presented tonight, but when the council we received, is a concern again about the neighbor. I guess it would be to the south, if I'm looking at this correctly, that they were concerned about the lights from the vehicles coming and going would be basically shining, towards their house, and they would want like a fence that would basically prevent them from being disturbed by the lights. I didn't see that in the report. Is that a consideration? There was comments raised at the public open house with regards to the lighting. Are you referring to the property directly south of 986 on the same side of the road?
If so, then the headlights from the vehicles with how the road is angled would not be shining into their bedroom directly. With regards to that, we were more concerned with the properties across Ridge Road and the headlights going directly into their living quarters or the potential bedrooms. That's why we did not recommend any fencing or privacy screens through the conditions on this one.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Hare. Mr. Hare, I noticed that the Niagara Region had input with reference to the cul-de-sac and churning for waste collection.
Yes.
But I didn't notice any input from our fire department. Can you tell me whether that is something that we will see or whether that's not required?
It has been, the application has been circulated to them. They don't have comments at this time. They just advise that the road has to be, through conversations, that, again, all roads have to be designed for all weather movement.
Thank you.
Anyone else before I go back to Councillor Lewis? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship. The one question I have, and I guess it's to us or to staff, the applicant, the residents in the area asked a number of questions, but the applicant as well has requested some relief for several of the different parts of this application, of which some of those are municipal and some are regional requirements. I did have a chance to speak with the applicant prior to the meeting and asked if he would be comfortable with a slight deferral so that we could get answers to those questions from the region. So I just wanted to know if, from staff, if there was any concern if we have an applicant agreeing with a deferral, and also to have that conversation with the applicant in more detail about the woodlot portion. So I don't know if the director might have some comments with regard to that.
Yeah. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Director, for that. I guess my question is, if the applicant is here tonight, and we do want to have a discussion about that environmental protection zone and maybe some of the other requests in his ask, can we ask the developer tonight if he is okay with a 2-week deferral until the next regular council meeting?
Well, you've indicated that he's agreeable to a deferral, and whether he's agreeable or not, we can defer it. It would be shocking to me if someone were to launch an appeal to the the OLT, knowing that we're trying to work out some of the concerns that he's raised in terms of conditions for development. Now, I've been shocked before, but I don't believe that this is one of those cases, and we don't face a financial penalty if we go past the 90 days. So I do believe that there are some issues here that need to have some further discussion. And but before you move that, before one of you does that, I've got some questions if you don't mind. And so I'm not sure, Mr. Hare, whether you can answer this one or whether this is something that Ms. DeWaria would feel more comfortable answering. And that is, of the 4 main conditions that Mr. Parazater raised concerns about, 3 of them are conditions that have been requested by the region. And so if the region, if we were to exclude those conditions, that would leave the region in a position where they could appeal, could they not?
That is correct.
And do we know how you've been dealing with this file? And by the way, it's a good report. I wanted to mention that to you. Do we have any indication of how firm the region is with respect to some of these things like the restoration plan, which does seem a little odd.
We did get clarification from the region today, and in their email back to us, it is something that they are strongly encouraging the town to consider and impose. The way they worded it, it was not they left it up to the discretion of the municipality. When it comes to the private sanitary, I'm going to have to defer over to the region and their operations staff.
The restoration plan, that's also something that the town's environmental advisory committee raised and is supportive of, I believe, is that correct?
It is something that, yes, the town's environmental advisory committee requested. I also have some comments from the town's environmental staff on their opinions on the buffer, if the council would like me to read it in. Buffers are zoned specifically designed to provide a measure of protection to the natural heritage features and functions, or a transition area between the built form and the natural feature. All development applications adjacent to natural features within the Niagara region and the town of Fort Erie require setbacks, buffers, and/or vegetation protection zones. Buffers can help attenuate sediments and pollutants, screen against human disturbance such as noise, serve as habitat transition zones, and contribute to the protection of a given area by maintaining the microclimate conditions or limiting the spread of invasive species. A 5-meter buffer from the woodland located on the property was accepted by the environmental staff on the basis that the area would be revegetated. Therefore, staff highly recommend that this condition should not be removed. The white aster population on the property does not extend past the woodland drip line. Therefore, planting within the additional 5-meter buffer should not have any negative impacts on the species.
So, having said that, the consultant for the applicant raised concerns about the cost of putting in, it's not really a restoration plan, it's an enhancement plan, isn't it? Because there was there has been no vegetation other than meadow outside of the wooded areas, I understand it. So, do we have any idea what the cost might be if we were to impose that condition?
Oh, I just want to clarify, a part of it would be a restoration plan. That area to the south where the property sort of dips down, that would be restoration. But yeah, I see how it would be an enhancement plan for the rest of the area. According to the applicant's consultant, they estimated between $135,000. I was based on conversations I've had with our environmental staff to actually develop the reclamation the plan would probably be around $10,000, and then it'd probably be around another $60,000 to $65,000 in additional planting.
What if the municipality, what if a large portion of this natural area was dedicated to the municipality? Would the municipality have to undergo a restoration plan?
Unfortunately, that's not something I have an answer to at this time. That is something that we can take away and look into.
Let me ask your boss, Ms. Dewaria, if the developer decided that in order to avoid $75,000 cost or reduce the extent of the cost, he might be inclined to dedicate a portion of this, what will become environmental protection lands, to the municipality. Would the town then have to embark upon a restoration plan at the cost of $65,000, $70,000?
Your worship, I would say, because that's the requirement that the region has mentioned, that it should be restored. And even from environmental protection perspective, I think we, as a town, we should be setting up a good example if we have to take it under our ownership and restore that area which has been disturbed. Because that way we can set up a good example for the residents of the area that town has taken this area under its own ownership and restored the woodlot. So I would say even if we don't go to the whole extent, we should be doing something to restore the portion of the woodlot that has been disturbed.
So I'm thinking that there needs to be some further discussion about how extensive this restoration is. I understand restoration. I understand the southern portion of the woodlot where there appears to be something that's been left cleared. Maybe that should be restored. I'm having a lot of difficulty, I think, grasping that you'd have to pay $75,000 to plant where there were no plants before, and that's much of the buffer area. So anyways, you've answered that question. The applicant has also indicated that he's filed a hydrogeological report. The request is for something a little more broad than that, a geotechnical report that would include a hydrological report, something about paving, something about something else. Is that something that there could be some further discussion upon? Chemical analysis, whatever that would mean. Do you know what that relates to?
Not fully. I did have a conversation with our development engineering staff with regards to this condition today before we had this meeting. They did advise that that condition is a standard condition that they do impose on, again, most municipal as well as private roads, as it is best practice to require geotechnicals for roads. And then, again, they did remind me that this is, again, a condominium road and the town will not be assuming it, so.
So this might be another section that there could be some further, or condition that could be some further discussion on. And then there was also the question raised by Mr. Parazater about the sediment control. I think the conditions, just to be clear, many of the conditions in this report are pretty standard. And they're the type of conditions that one would expect would pop up in a development proposal. Do you have any comments about the provisions relative to the sediment and erosion plan and the fencing that was referred to?
We did reach out to the region today. We did confirm that it is sediment or a fencing that is associated with the sediment erosion and control plan. Again, that's not just restricted to sediment and erosion control as a result of drainage. There is also sediment and erosion control that's a result of wind. Again, this is something that both our staff and the region has asked for. This is one thing I would probably recommend council not deviate from.
Is there anything in this report that requires any type of permanent fencing?
No.
So I have no other questions on this. I just wanted to get some of those things out. So Councillor Dubanow, I'm going to go back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I would like to move that we postpone this. I'm just wondering perhaps if staff might offer a suggestion on how soon we could have this back. Ms. Del Warria had mentioned, perhaps the next meeting might be sufficient to keep us within our timelines. I'm just wondering if that might be...
And the next committee meeting would be November the 6th, which is 3 weeks.
Your Worship, that would exceed the timelines. That would not be able to meet the 90-day time frame. We could try to speak with the region tomorrow and day after and maybe bring it to next week if that's okay with council. We can try to do that.
I'm fine with that. I think there needs to be some dialogue as well with the applicant. And I think the applicant needs to be engaged in this as well. If you think you can do it in a week, that's fine. I guess
we'll find out.
I mean, the reality is, we may be able to find that out. The 90 days, we can't be financially penalized. So I really doubt that Mr. Parazater is going to embark upon an application to the OLT. So we can put it over for a week if you're okay with that. And if nothing has been accomplished then, you can always put it over to the 6th.
Yeah.
So then it would be October the 23rd.
Yeah, that would be postponed to October 23rd, Your Worship.
There's no debate on that. The only question would be with respect to timing. If there are none, all in favor of the motion to defer? Opposed? Were you guys up late or down? Yeah. Get your hands up late or were you up? Yeah, okay. Okay. You were contemplating. Okay, so this matter is going to be put over until next week, and hopefully by next week there'll be an opportunity for some dialogue between the applicant, the town, the region with respect to some of these issues, so that council can then make a decision to move forward. And if we're not in a position, we may end up having to put it over further. Thank you very much, Mr. Hare.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a consent agenda. We have 2 reports in the consent agenda. Can I have a mover for reports CS 09 2023 and CS 10 2023? Councillor Dubanow. Are there any questions or comments with respect to either of those reports? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. My comments are in regards to CS 10 2023, the fall 2023 capital variance reports. Just looking at some of the numbers, I did have an opportunity to talk to Mr. Walsh earlier in today about it, because I saw that on page, well, it doesn't really have a page number on Appendix 1 on the first page. It talks about the sanitary sewer flow monitors. Like none of the money was spent, and it said it's going to, project canceled by the director. That's not actually the case. The project we've already done, my understanding is that it's already been done, it just hasn't been billed, but it was not canceled.
Okay, do we want some clarification from Mr. Walsh on that? You're the director. This is the sanitary sewer flow monitors?
Mr. Mayor, our apologies on this. It was a project that slipped through the cracks. It has been purchased, just not invoiced. So the money's been spent.
So this is, Mr. Jansen, are you aware of that?
Yes, I did speak with Mr. Walsh today. So the second recommendation in that case, what we would do is we would remove that project. The amounts aren't fully known at this point, so we would defer the closure of that to the next semi-annual capital variance report in the spring. So I would just reduce the second recommendation by the $60,000 budget of that report to be 1 million.
21,000.
Yeah, I don't have the number here. It's the cover is 1,021,185. Is it?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for pointing that out, Councillor Rose.
Well, I was very concerned about us not having the flow monitoring, because we're so concerned about the problem with extraneous flow, so so I did pick up on that one. And I was surprised that it said canceled, and I was happy to hear that it wasn't. My next concern was on, okay, I don't know what page these things are. It's still Appendix 2, page 8, where it says park waste receptacles, and we had $60,000 budgeted. We didn't spend any of it. And I know I've brought that up in the past too, is that some of our very nice parks that have been around for a few years, they're not the new ones, and I do understand that when we get a new park, the waste receptacles are changed, but there's some of the old parks that the parks are in pretty good condition and well used, that we still have painted barrels. And I brought this up a few times, that we really do need a nice waste receptacle rather than just a painted barrel. And I was surprised that none of the money was spent, because I know we priced them last year, they were about $800 a piece, which is a fairly high price. But the same point to say, well, we're going to wait until the playground is replaced. I don't get it. I think you can change the receptacles now. I'm just wanting to bring that to the attention that we didn't spend that money, and I wish we had, because I can tell you a few places where they should be put.
Well, the report says that there were staffing resource limitations, and that's why it wasn't started. It'll be initiated in 2024.
Again, with due respect, we're talking about exchanging one garbage can for another garbage can.
Well, I think it might be a little more sophisticated than that. I think it might be arranging to put out a process where you purchase the stuff, and then, there are I counted 8 parks projects which have the same notation, staff limitations, and they didn't proceed in 2023, they're gonna proceed in 2024, so that's one of them. There are 7 others, and I suppose the criticism would be leveled at we didn't have enough staff.
Okay, I'm not gonna challenge that one. We're talking about exchanging garbage cans. And if you're going to buy one garbage can, you can buy 3. And if you're buying 2 new garbage cans for the new parks, you can buy 1 for the old park. and put it in the same RFP. But anyway,
Well, before you go on, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's not as sophisticated as I thought, maybe there wasn't a purchasing component. Mr. Walsh, do you have any comment on that item?
No, that's a parks project, but I will comment on the purchasing procedure. It's not just ringing up Jimmy's garbage cans and buying them. It's preparing the spec, it's getting the documentation in order. It is a process.
Okay, Councillor Noyes, back to you.
nothing further, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. McQueen, as I pointed out, there were 8 parks-related projects, all of which didn't proceed in 2023. They're going to be apparently initiated in 2024. Does that have an impact on our 2024 budget in terms of the number of projects that we might expect to see, capital projects for parks?
Through you to council, I think there's, one of the important items was that we did go through the process of resource, an additional resource that would be focusing on park projects. We did have some staff changing, so that did contribute to some of the delays, but certainly your comment about our capacity to initiate the projects will have to be a consideration that we would take into account for the 2024 capital budget, as always, and certainly we can take that under advisement.
I think that would be prudent, particularly under the economic times that we're in right now. If there are no other, Councillor Christensen.
Through you, Your Worship, I wanted to comment on page 8 because I was also concerned about the 8 projects that had been delayed. My reaction, having worked for the better part of 15 years in various levels of municipal government, was that this was indeed a reflection of the staffing constraints that we know we've experienced, the recruitment problems that we have, and the fact that our staff, and I've observed this as well, just in terms of asking questions of staff and dealing with my constituents, that our staff have been severely challenged in the past year, that they have done an excellent job in the most part, and I would like to thank them for that, but that, yes, everything from the purchasing process, which can be very long and time-consuming, the pressures of all of the other projects that we have seen come across council floor and ones that we don't see. I think that I concur with the CAO that there needs to be a review, especially in time of constraint. But I also think that it behooves us to be aware that a certain level of staffing is required to produce excellence in public service, and that's the effect of not having that resource available is what we see here. Thank you, Your Worship.
Ms. Dewari, just on that point, I know that there were a number of staffing challenges during 2022, 2023. Many of them have been addressed now, and we've got maybe not a completely full complement, but you've got some very good, very energetic, and some of them very experienced staff. How are you fit in your department right now in terms of your staffing?
Your Worship, the development approval section, we have one vacant position right now, which is for the junior development planner. Once that gets filled, so development approval section would be fully staffed. But in the community planning section, we still are shy of a couple of positions. So, and maybe Mr. CEO could chime in as well, but we are still understaffed in the community planning section.
And you're working on that?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Mr. McQueen?
Thank you through the chair, and I appreciate the comments of Ms. Delaria. We've had discussions, Ms. Delaria, Mr. Walsh, and myself, as well around some of the efficiency around actually getting projects moving forward through our own departments. And so we are looking at some efficiency in terms of role clarity around how certain projects within the parks may be better suited in our infrastructure side of the business in order to plan those projects and move them forward, and reserve the limited staff we have in the community planning to be looking at parks planning and more comprehensive overviews of park development. So that process is something that we're looking to move forward with next year. We think that'll create a bit more efficiency in some of the projects that have come forward that may be more infrastructure and procurement related, may be better suited within our infrastructure division. And so we're looking at those efficiencies to ensure we can get more done with, in some cases, the same resources.
Thank you. Any further questions with respect to the consent agenda? If not, all those in favor of those two report recommendations? None opposed, that is carried. That takes us to Planning and Development Services. Before I go to Councillor Dubanow, does anybody want a brief recess? If not, then we're going to charge forward. Councillor Dubanow.
Thank you, Your Worship. Planning and Development Services is in session for the evening. We have no presentations or delegations. However, we do have a report returning to the agenda. This was deferred on October 2nd, 2023, previously moved by His Worship, and that is PDS 66, 2023. I have one question for staff, but I'm just wondering, do any other members of council have any questions or comments regarding the report? And Your Worship.
Yeah, I just had a couple of very brief questions. The first had to do with the sidewalks, and it looks like that road may be scheduled for reconstruction in 2024 or 2025.
I think it's 25, Your Worship.
I believe. So if this is approved, when would we typically request the funding for the sidewalk from the developer? Or would we, when would that be triggered?
Who wants to take that? Ms. Del Oria? Yeah, go right ahead.
So that would be a condition of the subdivision application or the condominium, and once they would satisfy before we would register that, we would get the securities.
So if we proceed and go through the normal course, we reconstruct the road, there's still a hold on the development because of the sanitary sewer issue, we would then know exactly how much the developer's share is, and would we then simply bill for that, and that would be, payment of that would then fulfill that condition of the draft approval?
Mr. Warrior?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. And we recently redid, we're in the process of redoing Idlewild, and Idlewild has sidewalks on both sides of the street. This calls for sidewalks on one side of the street. We have a policy, I think. So why would Idlewild have two sidewalks if we're only putting in one sidewalk typically?
I see Mr. Walsh here. Go right ahead.
Mr. Mayor, or through you, Mr. Chair, Idlewild had two sidewalks prior to reconstruction, except for a very short stretch. So when we reconstruct, we more or less replace what's there.
Okay. And in order for us to change that policy, particularly where there's new development, council would have to, I presume, pass some type of resolution changing the policy.
Mr. Warrior, is that correct?
I believe so, Mr. Chair, that we would have to go through the process to change the policy.
Thank you.
And just one final question on this. We're working on an active transportation master plan, and would that weigh in on whether there should be sidewalks on both sides or just one side?
I'll ask Ms. Del Warrior, because this is regarding new development. I'm wondering maybe Mr. Walsh wants to chime in too for existing, but I see them consulting. So perhaps one of them can take it.
Mr. Chair, I believe when we would be doing the active transportation, we'll go through a public process, we will review where the sidewalks needs to be installed, and it would be a comprehensive process, and at that time we can definitely revisit. It has to be done on both sides or one side of the street, and I believe the population and the traffic would also, like the pedestrian traffic, would have a role to play in that as well.
Right.
And Your Worship, if I can just expand on that, is that something, once we have that plan available, is that something that we can then input into future draft plans of subdivision to ensure that we have the pedestrian linkages for future development applications relative to the active transportation master plan?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Did you have anything else, Your Worship?
I'm good.
Okay. Councillor Noyes.
My question is regarding the holding provision, regarding the wastewater and like sewer sanitary capacity. Do we have any idea or any idea of what the timeline may be? Are we looking at getting the answer to that soon, 10 years from now? We don't know.
I'll direct that to Ms. Deloria, but I had a question similar to that I was going to ask. But Ms. Deloria, do you or Mr. Walsh or anyone have any insight onto what we might be looking at?
I can try answering that question, Mr. Chair. So it's my understanding that Mr. IS is working on getting the survey done for the basement elevations. Once that is done, we would have a little bit of idea, and Mr. Walsh can correct me, what is the current capacity in the sewers, and then based on that, we can allow this application to move forward depending upon first where they stand in that whole queue. But maybe Mr. Walsh can elaborate on that.
Mr. Walsh, is there anything you wanted to add?
Sure. As Anamika stated, we are undertaking surveys on individual properties out there to determine how deep the basements are. That speaks to our sewer master plan level of service, in that we don't want sewage to a certain level, and that speaks to the risk. If we find there's plenty of room in our elevations compared to the sewer depth, we can move forward with this development and future developments as long as they're within our risk tolerance. If it's not, we'll move it. We are continuing on with existing plans already of trying to reduce inflow and infiltration into the sewers in this area in particular. We've refocused our efforts on this area, taken them off other areas. That will free up capacity. Further, there's probably going to be an opportunity to reline sewers, again, gaining capacity. Looking down the road at the area in general, there's a lot of demand for higher density in this area that will necessitate a sewer replacement to a bigger capacity. We've included that in our development charges study that council will see in the next few months. So it's a multi-pronged attack, but it's going to take a while.
I appreciate that information. Councillor Noyes?
No, that's fine. There's a lot of things in the air that we have to figure out, so the answer is unknown.
Yeah, I get that. I had a question on that, but I just wanted to, do any other members of council have any questions? I'm just wondering if, in light of the information, which it was very good information, I think it's helpful to at least give us an idea of where we are. But I'm just wondering if if council does approve this report to move forward, is there any possibility, and I don't know if we need an amendment, perhaps just to come back in the spring when construction season starts to see if we have any additional information, or if perhaps we're at the point where we have those elevations and can give a more certain answer. The concern the developer has is you put a holding provision on it, and I know this isn't going to happen, but the developer is concerned it's going to get put into a drawer and then we work on everything else. So I'm just wondering if perhaps sometime in the spring, just before the ground freezes, if perhaps we could have some information brought back to council just so we have an idea of where we stand. Ms. Deloria?
Mr. Chair, yeah, we can definitely bring a report back and to provide an update, and that report would be in collaboration with the IS services as well. It could be a joint report, and we can bring it back to council for sure.
Okay, very good. Your worship.
Yeah, so my only comment would be that I don't think we need a report until there's something to report. So, you know, there may be something before the spring, there may be something after the spring, but I would think that the report would be an update with some advice to us other than we're in the process of working on it, unless you just wanted to know whether there's a status of some sort.
Yeah, the reason I wanted to ask is just to ensure that, you know, council is aware that we're on top of it, just so that if there is any opportunity to move forward that we can, because the housing concerns are not going to go away. I mean, we understand that. So that was the only reason I was asking that. And I see Ms. Deloria nodding, so I think we're good. One last time, any further questions, comments? I'll call the question then. All those in favor? So that report carries. We have no more reports this evening. Do any members of council wish to raise any new business or inquiries under Planning and Development Services this evening? So I'm seeing none. My apologies. We have the memorandum from Mr. Jennings. I'm just wondering if Ms.
I'll move it.
Oh, Your Worship, yes, we do need a mover for that. I was on autopilot. I apologize. Didn't have a mover before. That's on that memo is on the floor for any questions or comments from council. Okay, it's a memo, so I don't think we need a vote on that. Just wondering.
Receive, so we do have to vote on it.
Oh, so we do? Okay. That kind of threw me off. I'll call the question then. All those in favor? So that carries. Thank you very much, and thank you, council, for that. Any questions about the business status report this evening? All right, I hand the chair back to you, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dubanow. That takes us to Infrastructure Services, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I'll try to make this quick. There are no presentations or delegations. There are no reports. Any new business inquiries? Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, my apologies, Councillor Noyes. I'm going to wreck your record. I'm just wondering, there's been a lot of inquiries recently, particularly on Lakeshore Road, with regard to shoreline and erosion concerns and issues related to storm damage and other things that happen. And I know these concerns have also been brought up with the mayor as well. And there's been some dialogue back and forth with staff, councillors and residents in the area. But I'm just wondering, Mr. McQueen, could you just explain what we have coming forward? I believe we have a shoreline evaluation process that's coming forward regarding any issues and determining almost like a triage.
So through you to council, so earlier this year, council will recall that we attended the Association of Municipalities of Ontario conference, met with the Minister of Infrastructure. Some of the areas that we raised related to your comments would have been around a more comprehensive shoreline protection plan, flooding and climate resilience around flooding, all somewhat related. And so we're moving forward with a government relations strategy with that to try and bring in some provincial and possibly federal participation, because our shoreline is part of the international border. So really trying to advocate for both federal and provincial participation to look at a more comprehensive shoreline protection plan, because some of the issues that you raise affect provincial ownership along there, or provincial bodies such as the Niagara Parks Commission, which is doing some work. Certainly we have town properties along the shoreline, we have privately owned properties along the shoreline, and the list goes on. So, and it's not just impacting Fort Erie, but certainly other communities along the shore. So the approach would be to look to get some support both federally and provincially to look at a more comprehensive plan, because we certainly have a number of projects along the shoreline which are in the multi-million dollars of individual project restorations and fortifications. So looking at a more comprehensive plan certainly would be in the interest of the town and other property owners along the shoreline. So we would like to move that forward, and that's an initiative that, you know, council's been supportive of, and will continue to do that moving forward and provide updates as we get them.
Councillor Dubanow, anything further?
Nope, that's it. I appreciate the update. Thank you.
Any further inquiries? Seeing none, that brings us to the business status report. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, Infrastructure Services is now closed, and I turn the chair back.
Councillor Noyes, you were on pace for a record until Councillor Dubanow slowed you down. That takes us into Corporate and Community Services. Councillor McDermott.
Thank you, Worship. Corporate and Community Services is now in session. We have no presentations and delegations. Could I get a mover for the LLS 01-2023 report? Thank you, Councillor Christensen. Any comments or questions, Worship?
Yeah, so this is the 1, 2, 3, 4th, maybe the 5th time that this has been visited since 2016. And in the past, there have been reports that have provided some analysis, some information relative to the number of reports, the length of the meetings, the number of public meetings, and that type of thing, none of which appears in this particular report, which I think would be very helpful for at least me to understand the rationale and what the potential implications may be. When this type of report came before council in 2020, there was a suggestion that there be fewer council meetings. That was modified simply because we ended up with, and we will end up with some 4.5 hour meetings, which typically happens in the summer. So before we embark upon that, I would like to get a little bit more background information on this to see where we're heading. And so if there's anyone else that wants to speak, I'll hold back, but I'm going to move that we defer this so that we can get that additional analysis. And I understand that staff isn't concerned about a brief delay, so that we can at least make sure that we understand why we're doing what is being proposed.
Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've read this report and I understand some of the concerns, but I'm wondering if I could move 2 amendments just to get some discussion going, even if we do decide to postpone this. The first thing I'd like to move would be to eliminate the 5 p.m. start time and revert back to 6 p.m. And the second part that, and I apologize, with regard to rules of procedure, is it better for me to move both and speak to both at the same time, or should I move one and then speak to it and then we vote and then move the second and speak to it? I'm just thinking of expediency and the best way to, because I can kind of wrap them both into the same issue.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
I don't think staff is wedded to the 5 p.m. start. So that I think, my view is that if, and having spoken to the CAO about this, if the matter was deferred, they would come back with the additional information and perhaps would remove that from the report. So before we start, I think, changing this report, I would suggest that why don't we send it back to them. You've already indicated what your views are on the 5. You can certainly speak to whatever your other concern was, but you know, before we start getting our shorts in a knot over some of the issues, why don't we just send it back for them to review?
Okay, I appreciate that, Your Worship, because that may be beneficial. The other point I wanted to raise was just being my second term on council, we have been through this exercise a number of times, and we've slowly moved forward. I think we were having 3 or 4 meetings a month at some point when I started, and we've slowly peeled it back. And there's always a concern about you know, access to the public, the amount of time, the length of the meetings. And you know, I'll give my indication. I don't know if it's necessary to postpone this, but I'm wondering if perhaps it might be more beneficial to just put right off the top, 1-year pilot project. We come back, we have a staff report that comes back in a year. It outlines, you know, any challenges that staff had, any benefits to staff, any issues raised to transparency. That's why I raised the 5 p.m. start time is, you know, for an individual like myself, it's very difficult to get here at 5 p.m. as a councillor, and if we're having public meetings or opportunity for delegations or even for individuals to come observe what we're debating, it may make it hard for them. So I think from a transparency standpoint, we should stick to 6 p.m. And the pilot project would also give some assurances that we're looking into this. We're ensuring that we still continue to have access to the public, but at the same time also looking at the concerns staffs have raised as well. So I'll just put that out there. I'll let council decide if maybe someone wanted to speak. I'd be prepared to move them, but we'll let council determine where we want to go on a deferral.
Well, before we go any further, if you want to put the motion forward for a deferral, let's do this before we get into any more on it, really.
he's suggesting we put it forward.
So.
So
you
we've got
wanna move-
Councillor Noyes. I don't know whether, I don't want to be cutting Councillor Noyes off
Okay.
on the one hand. On the other hand, I don't want to be belaboring this because I think there's a need for us to get some clarification. Both the points that you've raised were part of the discussion that I had with the CAO and the clerk. Both of them, I think, are going to be taken care of in another report. I didn't want to
Okay,
embark upon a
I'll go to
lengthy...
Councillor Noyes, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. Actually, I was going to reiterate what Councillor Dubanow said, but again, I do think that if we can make a decision in regards to the start time, that takes one thing off the next report. I personally would not support any time change that would not allow all councillors to be here on a regular basis or put them at risk. So as far as I'm concerned, I've talked to at least 2 councillors that are working, have day jobs. The 5 o'clock is a non-starter, so I don't know why we don't take that out today and just really concentrate on the frequency of the meetings and the makeup of the meetings as opposed to the time it starts.
Thank you. Well, since I've let everybody else talk, Councillor Lewis?
You know better, right?
I do.
Just a couple of comments. I do agree with the 6 p.m. From a constituent point of view, trying to get here when most people work. From a selfish point of view of someone who has no choice but has to work, I certainly agree with the 6 p.m. Start timeline. I also would agree that I think a pilot project is probably the way to go with this. I think if there are opportunities that present themselves, staff will certainly come back to us and tell us that there is a problem and we need to adjust, and that's something that can be flexible and done at any point at the direction of council, with or without a staff report. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention, actually 2 things. One, as someone who has returned to a second term with almost 2 decades in between the first and the second, and having experience supporting a board of directors at the staff level, I completely agree with the concerns that have been raised by staff, and I think if we want to keep our good staff, that are the people that make us successful in our jobs here, we need to have some serious regard for that, because I do know when people are looking for employment or looking for new employment, certainly that work-life balance is something that is important to most. And then the other was with the motion to defer. I just don't know if I understand correctly what it is we're deferring this for. And I'm just wondering if maybe I missed it, but...
No,
Your
we're
worship?
deferring it because there's no analysis here. There's no real rationale as to why we're doing this, and previous reports have provided that information. So I'd like to get that information. I'd like to, the report, my understanding is, and maybe we can clarify this with the CAO, that there would be a revised report from the clerk, that it would not include a 5 p.m. start, and that there would be a reference to this being a pilot. But I think we should get the analysis because I think it's helpful. We may have an understanding of what's going on. I don't think the public may have an understanding of what it is we're looking at or why we're looking at it. The previous reports did have that type of information, and it's something that I think helps us to at least have a benchmark once the pilot is over. So how did this work? Did it work the way we thought it would work? Was there something different? So that's really what the deferral is.
Okay.
So are you looking for an answer somewhere down the line here, Councillor Lewis? Aside from his worship?
Well, I mean, I hope the report includes how we got to where we're at now, because I don't even know why we are at the 6 o'clock mark and have the structure we have in front of us in the current.
That's historic. That's historic.
But there's a reason for why we're doing it, and I'm sure that will be included.
Well, I don't know if that's going to be included, but I mean, we're already where I think what we need, what I'm looking for is, I know how we got to where we got since 2014, because the reports have been attached, and there's been some analysis, and there's been some indication of why there have been changes and why some of the proposed changes haven't been adopted. I just want to see similar type information so that we know, okay, this is how many meetings we've got, this is the number of reports we process, these are the number of public meetings, because the caveat is always that you can have a special council meeting, and that's great, and we've had to do that in the past, I'm not wanting to rely upon special council meetings, but I do want to see what the data is and what the rationale for the change is. It's not really fully articulated.
Okay, any more comments or questions before we entertain the mayor's motion?
So the only question I would have from staff is November the 16th or,
Oh, wait a minute. We want to hear your motion before we,
yeah, so I move to defer the report to the council and committee meeting of either November the 6th or November the 20th. Is November the 6th adequate for staff to put that together?
Through you, your worship, yes, November 6th should be enough time.
Okay, so then I would move that we defer to November the 6th for the additional information that I've referred to.
anybody in favor of the motion? Against? Carried. So, back to work.
Okay, so do I still have the floor, Chair?
Yes, you do, your worship.
Okay, so I understand that part of this has to do with staff, and I certainly understand that. I was told that staff, if we have fewer meetings, then staff doesn't have to be here as frequently. Whether we have, and that's true, the senior staff are going to be at a council meeting, whether we have 2 a month or 3 a month, and the concern that I heard was the concern about some of the middle management staff, none of whom need to be here, particularly if they don't have a report. Even if they have a report, in my view, it shouldn't be necessary for the staff member to be here. The director should know the file. If it's a public meeting, then the planner has to be here because the planner introduces the report, unless the director's got some other proposal where the director would introduce the report. So to some extent, when a staff member is hired, they have an understanding of what the job is, I believe. I don't know, and this is a question that I would have, Chair, when a staff person has to come to a meeting of ours, such as Mr. Hare this evening, and was here for a couple of hours, is he allowed that time off someplace else? In other words, does he get lieu time for the time that he had to work here?
Mr. Luria?
Mr. Chair, through you to His Worship, yes, he will be able to bank his time and then he can take it as overtime, or like he can take a vacation for that, yes. He would be able to bank that time.
So then, just having read the report, if I hadn't had conversation with the CAO, I don't think I'd have an understanding of what the issue is. So let me ask the question. What is the issue for staff that they feel they need to have fewer meetings with a week in between? Because from my perspective, when I look at this and when I look at where we've come since, and Councillor Lewis and Councillor Noyes were on council the last time around, we had meetings every Monday. The only meetings we didn't have on a Monday night were the fifth Monday of the month, or Christmas. This schedule is going to provide for a month gap between the last meeting in December and the first meeting in January. It may be that the Christmas vacation is going to represent a slowdown in business, but we're talking a month, and from my perspective, the speed of business in this community is the speed of how council processes their applications. So we've gotten to where we are now. In 2019, there was a suggestion that we go to 2 meetings per month. That was modified to make sure that the months when we typically received heavy planning applications, so I think it was April, May, September, October, or October, November, we would have 3 meetings. That kind of got, so that was approved. So we didn't go quite as far as what is being suggested now when it was suggested then. If the concern is that there needs to be time for staff to prepare reports, I get that. They don't need to be here unless they've got something that specifically relates to a report that we need to hear from them on. Otherwise, in my view, the director can deal with that. We now have situations where we have council and committee meetings, we have regular council meetings that have reports on them. So we're going to have 2 meetings a month according to this schedule. The first meeting will be a council and committee meeting. We will be able to approve reports by bylaw at this council meeting. But if we have a committee report on that council meeting, regular council meeting, I'm not prepared to agree, and maybe the majority of council doesn't agree with me on this, but I don't believe that we should pass a bylaw the same night that we approve a report. I believe that there needs to be at least some space. So we have a report on the second meeting of the month, which is a regular council meeting. We can't approve what comes out of that report by bylaw until the next month, unless we have a special council meeting as part of the council and committee meeting, which is the next meeting, which will be the, let's say, the second week of the month. So it becomes quite confusing as to what the actual benefit is. What it does, and I would go back to Councillor Dubanow, my concern would be that as a council, we have tried to encourage public engagement. We've done that a number of times, and we refer to it on our strategic plan, public engagement. We're talking about reducing the opportunities for public engagement by 4 meetings per month. Not a big deal, except when you look at the history over the last 6 years, we've reduced a number of occasions. So that's a concern. The other concern I have is that when we have these long council meetings, I don't care who you are, by the time you get to 10 o'clock at night, particularly if you're one of the councillors who has had to work during the day, it becomes pretty difficult to stay focused. And I really don't think it makes for good decision-making. I know Councillor Noyes, that we've gotten to some hours where it's just been really difficult to stay focused and make good decisions. So that's the other concern that I've got, hence the reason I requested information. But to circle back to where I was, what is the concern? What is the issue? And what's motivating the request for fewer meetings other than the need for some space between meetings, which we can accommodate? But you know, if we had 2 council meetings for those 4 months of the year, I don't understand what the problem is, because we can ratify all of that stuff at the final council meeting. So maybe someone can enlighten me on what the problem is.
Mr. McQueen?
Thank you, through the chair. So I guess maybe just to back things up, in terms of the report process that staff goes through, our report process starts 2 weeks before the council meeting. And so we go through, there's a quite significant number of hours that staff go through in preparation of reports. When we have weekly meetings of council, we often have, in some cases, 2 report cycles or 3 report cycles happening concurrently internally. And so the proposal was brought forward, and to the mayor's point, some of the rationale was for allowing that 1 week gap for us really is to allow departments like planning to batch the work. So it's more around efficiency of how the reports are flowing through. And so we have more efficiency and one process happening at one time, so that that batching can exist through the report flow. And so that was the rationale for having a 1 week gap in between the committee and council meetings and the council meetings. We continually run into the same issue with the bylaws needing to be approved. My understanding from Ms. Dilwaria is that the timing for the planning reports, the clock stops at the report getting approved by council, so it's not delayed to the bylaw, but I'll look to be corrected. So that delay in approving the bylaw, although most developers would like to know that it was indoctrinated in bylaw, that delay doesn't delay the clock from stopping. And in terms of the public engagement, I think the latter section of the report is actually recommending that we allow virtual, hybrid, and online meetings for a number of the committees that council previously had not permitted under different interpretation, but our new clerk has taken a look at that, and some of the ombudsman reports around what is permitted for virtual and online meetings to increase opportunities for public engagement. actually have been ruled on by the ombudsman, and so we're confident now that we can have those meetings permitted with the approval of council to start moving forward. So I think we're just trying to find some balance in terms of new opportunities for public engagement and also some efficiency internally for staff, with a bit of a break in between the report cycles to ensure that we're getting other work done and also being efficient in terms of processing those reports.
So I agree with the permitting committee members to participate by Zoom. I agree with that. I've agreed with that all along. And so I certainly support that change. That will facilitate public engagement for sure. So what I'm hearing is that we need not be concerned about having a special council meeting called on a committee meeting night, because our business will be more efficient, because we'll have one committee meeting. We'll have committee reports undoubtedly still on regular council meeting nights, but then we won't have to worry about calling a special council meeting for the night of the next committee meeting. Is that what I heard, Chair?
Are you directing that question to somebody, Your Worship?
Well, I'm asking you, and you can direct it to whom you think could best answer.
Mr. McQueen?
Through the chair, short of maybe some unforeseen situations or exceptional circumstances, I know in the past year, council made a decision to add one special council meeting to deal with a planning matter, I believe, that had some time sensitivity. And then council has had special council meetings assigned on the nights of committee and council to advance issues that council thought needed to be expedited. And so those may exist, but I think to the point that the mayor is making, if there is efficiency and the ability to proceed with the schedule that's been proposed, certainly it is incumbent on staff to ensure that we can efficiently deal with the reports and get the matters of council before you in a timely way. And it's been proposed that a pilot be put in place for 24, and I guess that puts the onus on staff to ensure that that schedule will work. And in the absence of it working or issues arising during the year, then I would say we revert back to the previous schedule in 2025.
So, Chair, I would suggest that Councillor Dubanow's motions to strike the 5 p.m. date would be in order, and the motion to treat this as a pilot project would be in order. I'll support the amendments, not going to support the report, because I'm still not satisfied that we've been given an adequate rationale as to why this should be done. Thank you.
Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. Just wanted to make a few comments on basically on what Mayor Redekop said. I do remember meetings that went past 11:30, and I think that even happened when Councillor Lewis was with us and we were having 4 meetings a week.
I'm sure he was.
I didn't hear that, so that's probably a good thing, right? Anyway, and I can remember saying a few times as the hours waned on that when I stopped thinking, I should stop voting. And we came to that situation a few times where we were looking at past 11:30 and we were getting home at midnight, which I think was really too hard on the staff and also too hard on the council. But usually those meetings started off with a public meeting in regards to where there was a large number of concerns, and we anticipated that we even had chairs in the atrium. We anticipated that there'd be a huge public response and concerns and ideas raised. That I would say that if we can anticipate that there's a public meeting or a topic that we know is going to be where we think we're going to have to put chairs in the atrium, that perhaps there needs to be a special meeting called for that public meeting. I know we can't always anticipate that, but I would think that should be something perhaps in the back of our minds that, for instance, short-term rentals, and there's a few other ones that are huge development that we know there's a lot of concern that perhaps they should have their own day. And I don't know how. I have no idea how that would work, but I think that would probably end at the 11 o'clock meetings. And I would just throw that out for some consideration. And I know we can always call an extra a meeting, So that would be one of my thoughts. But I think if I'm I can't add, I guess, we're only talking about perhaps 4 or 5 fewer meetings a year. We're not talking a huge reduction in the number of times we meet. Am I correct on that? 4? Okay, so I'm in favor of this report to support that, because we're looking at 4 as a pilot project. But I also want to be able for staff to feel, okay, this is, you know, we're gonna have a house full, and that perhaps this needs to be put on a separate day of the agenda, whether it's council and committee, or a council meeting. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. In light of the fact that this is still on the floor, I would like to move those 2 amendments, that we eliminate the 5 p.m. start time, and that this be a 1-year pilot project with staff to report back to council with the results. And if I may speak very briefly to that.
Just 1 second.
Oh, certainly.
Mr. Clerk, do you want me to run those requests, those amendments separately, or can I run them together?
Through you, Chair, we can vote on them as one amendment. If council wishes to have it divided, they can ask that.
Everybody be okay with that one amendment? Okay. Carry on.
Yeah, and just a brief comment, just to touch on what Mr. McQueen said. I will be looking forward to that report, and I do expect that if we're going to do this, that it needs to be sold to us, that this is something that they can make a go of. I think Councillor Noyes raised a very excellent point, though, about meetings that we know are going to draw the public, that there's going to be a lot of participation. There are some municipalities in the region, perhaps ones that I won't name for other reasons, but they actually do that. If it's, and again, a lot of contentious development applications in that municipality that draw a lot of people out, and they do a lot of special meetings specifically for that purpose. They announce them and they accommodate those meetings. I'll leave that to staff, our planning department, to determine when that might be best appropriate. And certainly as a councillor, I would be open to that, and it would, I think, benefit us if we put all that business into one night knowing it's going to run long. So those are my amendments, and that the challenges to staff right now. You got 1 year, so we'll see how it goes, and we'll see where we are a year from now.
Councillor Welch, for the amendment?
No, I would just wanted to say I will support the amendments and will support the report. I think in terms of public engagement, we have tools and staff today that we did not have in years past in terms of communications, technology, as a couple examples. And I do think efficiency and reports coming through will be beneficial, and certainly support that finding a balance. And I would hope that if we do find that this is, if it does pass, presuming that it does, that if staff does find that if it isn't working, that they would come back sooner than within a year to revert back to the old plan. And maybe I'm looking at this from a different perspective, but supporting a board and seeing how quick one meeting turns into the next, and how little runway there is between all the other monsters that come through the door when you're trying to do the day-to-day, I think only those who have done it can appreciate it. So those are my only comments.
Anybody else before I call on the amendment? All in favor of the amendment? Carried. Anything further? All in favor of the report as amended? Carried.
Wait a second. Shouldn't you call for opposed?
Beg your pardon?
Shouldn't you call for opposed? You asked for all in favor. You didn't ask for opposed.
Sorry, Your Worship. Any opposed? Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any new business inquiries, Your Worship?
Yeah, just to the report that was passed. The suggestion made by Councillor Noyes and commented on by Councillor Dubanow, I think staff should take that seriously, so that if it looks like we've got a report, let's get ahead of it so that we can make sure that we've arranged for a special council meeting well in advance, so that councillors will know, because human nature being what it is, we're going to look at this schedule, we're going to say, okay, I don't have a council meeting then, so I'm going to do this, that, or the other thing. So let's try to get ahead of it, and that would be my request of staff, Chair.
Duly noted back there. Thank you. Anything on the business status report? Back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDermott. That then takes us to a closed session item. Can I have a mover for us to go into closed session? Councillor Lewis. Any questions or comments? All in favor? That The closed session, and Councillor Lewis, I understand you've got a motion for us to rise and reconvene from closed session?
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself that council rise and reconvene from closed session at 8:58 p.m. with report that staff and legal counsel proceed as directed in closed session.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That takes us then to scheduling of meetings. Councillor Noyes, Councillor Dubanow.
There's a Stevensville downtown meeting tomorrow via Zoom at 9 o'clock, and there's a Fort Erie not-for-profit housing on the 18th at 10 o'clock at Betty's.
Okay. Councillor Christensen and then Councillor Lewis.
There's a Fort Erie Library Board meeting tomorrow, October 17th at 4:30 p.m. at the Centennial branch of the library.
And Councillor Lewis.
On Wednesday, the 18th, the EDI Coalition meeting at 2 p.m., which I will not be able to attend, and the EAC meeting same day at 5:30 p.m. with site visits.
Any others? There being none, I'm going to go to you, Councillor Dubanow.
Yes, Your Worship, I'd like to move that council and committee adjourn at 7:30. No, it's an inside joke. 8:59 p.m. To reconvene into a regular meeting of council on Monday.
That was a terrible joke.
Yeah, well, there's a story behind it with all the.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
it's
those
an
in
inside joke among councilors, but.
All those in favor? Indifferent? Opposed?